It was like finding a clay at a garage sale. It was just...
Daredevil, Born Again, Episode 4. This is another great episode. I'm really happy to say that. This show is not disappointing me, and I'm really happy about that. I don't really want to go too in-depth with this. I'm just going to talk about just the highlights. And I think y'all will be okay with that, and I'll be okay with that. So let's just hit the highlights. So on the Fisk side of things, it's kind of a split thing, just like some of our episodes have been already, where half of our focus is kind of with Wilson and half of our focus is with Matt. So with Fisk, we actually finally get to see his assistant, or that guy in his administration, Daniel. You know, the young guy that he's got a liking for. We see more of his like life outside of the Fisk office, and he's with BB Urich, and he's kind of, they're having fun, and he kind of lets loose some information about some of his plans. And later, this backfires horribly on him, because BB actually makes an article, and it kind of it angers Fisk, because it kind of puts a dampener on his name and reputation while he's trying to do this thing with Red Hook and that harbor that we've seen once or twice. That he wants to kind of do a whole new building architecture. He wants to do all this kind of new stuff in this harbor for some reason that we just are not so sure of already. What's really funny about this episode is we actually get to see Fisk just kind of dealing with the repercussions of being the mayor of New York. All these things that he probably didn't even think of, which I just think is so funny. Like something as simple as him having to visit a middle school and having to sit through some kids singing a Starship to him, "We Built This City." And he's just visibly uncomfortable. And whenever they offer to sing another one, he's just like, nah, bro, I'm out. I'm good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now for our next one.
No, that's fine.
But yeah, and then what's hilarious is later, whenever he's angered by that news article, and he meets the whole administration, this is the first time he actually lets loose. In the entire show, he just starts hollering, and I mean, dude's losing it.
Mayor garbage! Is that it? Is that your best?
Coincidence? I think not!
And then Daniel steps up and says, "Hey, sir, it was me, sorry." And he's like, "I understand if you want to fire me, blah, blah." But it's funny, though, Fisk is actually impressed with him and says, "You know what, I'm not going to fire you, but don't cross me again." But right after this, he's going to a meeting, and it's like some, I can't remember if they're European, or I can't remember what they are, but they're actually singing the same "We Built the City" by Starship. And Fisk is just staring at him, like, in this odd, like, recollection of those kids he was with earlier. It's just funny. But then also, when they're at the harbor earlier, like I said, with Fisk struggling to Fisk is kind of struggling to cope with just being the mayor. I don't think he's used to having to step through people. He's used to just calling the shots and then being done just like that. But he's like, okay, let's do all this project. And that one woman he's like, yeah, we need building permits. We need this. And this person's got to sign off this. But then that has to go through this. Like, and what's funny is Fisk's like, well, let's do that.
The council will want to know that this project is viable.
Yes, let's commission that study.
We can't do that without the council's approval.
Get the council.
No. And we can't get their approval until we ask the public advocate to put it on the docket.
The poor dude has no idea how this works. And he's struggling to kind of cope with that. But you can tell he's trying. He's actively trying to do the right thing as far as in the public eye, but he's struggling. In this episode, we finally get to see him break a little bit. And to follow that up, we catch back up with Vanessa and him going to therapy with Heather. And they finally bring up, Heather's like, you know what? In order to move forward, we have to talk about this affair with Adam. Adam's the person we've heard about for the last 3 episodes. And Vanessa kind of goes into some weird detail about his hands and how he was just a good sketcher and blah, blah, blah. Like,
Why him? It was his hands. His hands drew beautiful sketches. I mean, just...
Can we not?
It was like finding a clay at a garage sale. It was just...
Dude, like, if my wife was talking about somebody like that, I'd lose it. Like, there's no question about that. But Fisk is like, enough, Vanessa. You know, he's just. But
It wasn't part of my husband's world.
What world is that? Politics?
Business.
Business. That's all it ever is business.
But, you know, like later, they're talking again, and he's like, you know, Fisk is talking about his father, and how he's like, I learned a lot of things from him, but forgiveness was not one of them. He says, I'm actively trying to do that. But what's funny is we get a hard cut to a scene where he's going down into a place where, like, his painting is at and some other things. And he sits down, and what's funny is throughout the whole series, you know, we've seen him eating some, like, very small meals because he talks about his, like, weight loss or whatever. But what's funny is he lifts the lid off of this plate in this place wherever he's at, and it's this huge, like, the dude's gonna feast. Like, it's a big meal. And he sits down to start eating, and then right across from him in a cage is none other than Adam, sitting there suffering, watching this guy eat while he's locked up, dirty and bloody, like, he's begging him to let him out. And Fisk is just loving this. And, of course, I think that kind of connects some dots about him maybe having some bloody knuckles. I don't know if he's beat up Adam or maybe somebody else to get to him. But I like that we finally kind of tied that back in and we understand what's going on now. But, yeah, the dude's just chilling out, locked up in some place, and Fisk comes down there to eat in front of him. It's just funny. But on the opposing side of things, the other half of the episode is obviously with Matt. And the very beginning, we catch back up with Matt at the morgue, and we get to see his morgue buddy. They're kind of putting away Hector's things, like the white tiger mask and the amulet and some other things. And he makes a mention to Matt. He said, "Yeah, point blank, you know, he was killed execution style, but we cannot find the bullet casing that took his life." And right after that, Hector's niece, which she's popular in the comic books for becoming the White Tiger later, but she comes up and she's mad. You know, she's talking to Matt like, you know, I want to see him, or he's going to have to be defended. You know, we need justice. And Matt just looks at her and says, we have to believe that the right person's going to go after his killer. And it's funny that he says that, because I genuinely think that he believes what he just said. It won't be him, and it won't be, you know, it's kind of hypocritical because every episode so far we've seen, someone challenges Matt's new mentality about letting the system handle it or not needing Daredevil. I mean, heck, Hector himself said, yeah, someone's got to do something, especially with Daredevil gone. You know, I mean, and I like that. Every episode we get somebody challenging this new ideology that Matt is trying to uphold. And this episode finally breaks that. And I love that it's in the form of the Punisher. Now, before I get into Frank Castle's return, let's kind of give some context about how that happens. Matt actually goes on the street, and he's actually trying to find the bullet casing that was mentioned that was missing earlier, and he ends up finding it in like a storm drain, like right down the street. And what's funny is he actually smells of it, and he tracks down Frank. Now, Frank's living up in some kind of apartment complex, whatever, and that's what he looks like right here. He's kind of got long hair, beard. And Frank just goes ham on about to kill him with a hatchet until he figures out that it's Red. You know, it's Matt. He recognizes him. And what's great is that they have a really nice conversation. And by nice, I mean like it's very raw. And people are hollering at each other and they're calling each other out. Like, I love that. But what's really nice is that unlike season 2, where Matt actually had a case to state with Frank, this time around he's just kind of throwing around these defensive words, because Frank is the only person, and I love this, Frank is the only person so far that sees right through Matt's crap and calls him out for it.
Come at me with that horse shit about saving lives. How about that friend of yours? You saved his life. You lost him, didn't you, Red?
He's like, Frank was talking about Bullseye. He said, yeah, Bullseye, he's breathing the same air you breathe.
You know he gets to breathe the same air that you breathe. You feel good about that? He got life! How about old Foggy? He got life.
I mean, that was such a great comeback, but also a great, just Frank being Frank. And what I love is that, again, he tears down every wall that Matt has put up, because this entire episode, along with the entire series so far, someone or someone at some point in every episode has challenged Matt's new ideology about just being hands off and letting the system handle it. And repeatedly, the system has failed. People are dying, and people need Daredevil. And I think that becomes super clear at that moment where Frank finally breaks that and calls him out on his crap. And I love that it was Frank Castle, of all people, the Punisher. That was right, and I love the way they implemented Frank into this.
That's why he's eating at you. That's why he's eating at you, because you know you didn't do a goddamn thing, and it's gonna keep eating at you. It's gonna keep eating and eating and eating. There's no getting away with it, you understand?
But alongside this, to kind of piggyback or to kind of build up to when Frank actually approaches him, a little earlier, Matt is actually instructed to go do a freebie for his law firm. They're like, yeah, we owe them a freebie. Go meet this guy in detention. And he goes and meets this guy, and immediately it's pretty funny. He's like, oh, of course, I get the blind one.
Leroy Bradford. Is there a Leroy Bradford?
Hey, look at this. I get the friggin' blind dude.
I get the blind guy. I couldn't help but laugh, because you know somebody would say that. You know they would. There is no ifs and buts about it. But it's funny. We see it a little bit earlier, but the whole case is basically him just stealing a little box of sweets from a little store because he wants something to eat, and you can tell he's either homeless or something's going on. But he pleads to Matt. He says, I want probation. I want nothing else. Work with me. Make it happen. I mean, he's pretty rude to Matt initially. And then Matt's like, yeah, okay, I'll see what I can do. And he goes and talks to, maybe it was the DA or somebody. And he's like, yeah, Matt's just, he's the Rizzler, dude. He's charming up all these girls, especially ones. The dude's just got game. I mean, you know this. Matt Murdock has game, dude. The guy is like a gigolo in the Marvel universe. Like, Matt scores a lot of women. I mean, it's just women like him, and he likes women. I mean, Matt's just got the charm for it. You know he does.
What, we go 35.
So the guy's looking for probation.
And I'm looking for Mr. Right. You're not him by any chance, are you, Murdoch?
Maybe.
But he ends up getting him like 10 days or something at Rikers. And he comes back. He tells this guy, he said, good news, I got you just 10 days. And he said, that's not probation. He's like, well, it's the best you're going to get, so you might as well take it. And then they end up getting in kind of an argument.
10 is a miracle.
Look, I said probation, and I meant probation.
Stop, Leroy. There is no probation to be had here. This is the best deal you're going to get.
Which actually just turns into him basically just talking down to Matt. Matt just kind of quits trying to defend what he just did for him. And the guy makes a good point.
They're willing to spend 5 times more to lock me up than they're willing to spend to feed me. And you come in here and tell me that that's a gift? That I should thank you?
You're right.
And again, like this moment earlier, by the time he meets Frank again, and Frank calls him out for his crap, all of that kind of comes together. And, that guy he represented, and then Hector, and all these other things that are happening, every little piece of this show so far has come to challenge Matt's new ideology and his new approach to his life, which is not him. And I think that's really cool that people challenge this, and then it all comes to a head whenever Frank just calls him out for it. And I'll be honest, I mean, you've seen it probably. I mean, you've seen it now. But Matt, Charlie Cox, dude, his acting is just superb, and so is Jon Bernthal's. And Matt just starts crying. I mean, he's trying to fight off crying whenever Frank is calling him out, and he's like, hey, he said, you still hear him, don't you? He said, I still hear my little boy.
Every time I start moving, I still hear my little boy. You see him? He says, get him, Daddy. Every single one of them get him. That's why I do what I do.
It's a great scene. And they kind of bond a little bit over that loss, each of their losses. But Matt, he ends up, Frank pushes him to a point where Matt snaps and literally grabs him by the throat and hits him. And then he's like, he backs off. He said, I'm sorry. He's like, that's not me. I'm sorry. But you can tell that Frank knows that that's the real him in there. And that he was the one who brought that out of him. and he's been trying to get loose. And the only little taste we've got of that was when he was beating up the officers in episode 2. You know, we know it's been there, but he's just been trying to suppress it. But speaking of that officer, we actually do see him one more time in this episode.
Counselor Murdoch. Funny how we keep finding each other like this.
Isn't it? You, doing the Lord's work today?
He antagonizes that cop. He said, "Why'd you get him killed?" You know, he's basically pressing him about Hector's death. And that cop, he's like, "Let me tell you one thing." And he pushes Matt up against a wall. He's like, "My brothers wear this badge. My grandpa, my father." He said they're decent guys. He said, "I didn't have anything to do with his death." And Matt actually listens into his heartbeat and actually knows that he's telling the truth, which is kind of interesting. I mean, this guy's been antagonistic to Matt so far, and then vice versa. But Matt makes another snarky remark. You know, he said, if you want to do something about me, he said, you're probably going to need more officers than you brought last time.
Only you'd have to bring a few more than the last time we met, wouldn't you?
It's just Matt being Matt. You know, he's I think that's funny. But to kind of wrap things up for the episode, by the time we see Fisk, you know, feasting on his meal and revealing that he's doing some things that are more in his nature, keeping Adam captive, it keeps cutting back and forth. Matt had come home after talking to Frank, and he was talking to Heather. And then Matt goes up to the rooftop at night. And we finally get to see where he's holding up his Daredevil equipment. We see all the helmets that we've seen in the trailers. And he actually opens up a case for his billy clubs. And he starts kind of practicing. He starts flipping around and doing cool stuff with them. And that was so cool to see. I mean, I love that. And while that's going on, at the same time, that was when we were getting intercut with Fisk and Adam. It was back and forth. And it was such a great cut. And then whenever Adam, towards the very end of the episode, he finally looks at Fisk or the camera, and he yells, "Let me out." And then it cuts right back to Matt throwing the billy cup right at the screen.
Let me out!
And I love that. Like that kind of was like symbolic of both Fisk and Matt finally giving into their true natures and letting those violent natures out that was mentioned in episode 1 where they're sitting in the diner. Like, I love that. Like, the way that the duality between Fisk and Matt has been portrayed throughout this entire series so far. I love that. And this episode really showed them both kind of struggling to hold on to that new style of life that they've both tried to adopt and they've both tried to accept. But we know deep down that they're not who they are. And it's only a matter of time until someone or something challenges them so far to a point where they end up having to give in to who they really are. And this episode done that wonderfully. Like, I can't say it enough. Like, I love that. But one more small thing. So to begin and bookend this episode, we actually finally get to see Muse. And I mean Muse for the first time. We actually saw the actor, him without a costume, nothing, at Heather's book signing in episode 1 or 2. Maybe it was 2. But this time we actually see him in full costume. He's carrying a body. He's carrying a body down to the subways. And we actually get a couple more shots of like his artwork around the city. And I noticed for the first time now, they're all signed Muse. Like his art with the Kingpin, the art with the Punisher. But that's where we kind of leave him in the beginning. And then by the end of the episode, after Matt and Fisk have their side-by-side scenes at the very end, like I was just talking about, we catch back up with Muse with this guy he's carrying in the subway. And he lays him down a table, and you start seeing all this artwork around the place, and a barrel of, like a 55-gallon barrel full of, like, blood or something. And then Muse just sticks in like a needle or some kind of, like, pump in this guy's leg and starts taking his blood, and the guy's just hollering. I mean, it's just messed up. And you see Muse's, like, eyes and how just crazy they look in his costume or his suit that he's wearing. So that's cool. We finally get to see Muse. They're paying that off, which honestly we're about halfway through the season anyways. It's kind of time we need to bring in Muse, and then we also need to get Matt back in the suit as Daredevil. It's getting about time, and I think, but one thing I will praise the show about is I like how they've taken the time to sit with Matt at this stage in his life, and we actually get enough time to build reasons of why he would go back to it, and not just, oh, they need me, I'm going to go back. No. I like that Frank and these other people that he's come across just in his day-to-day life have slowly picked away those walls that Matt has put up. And I like that we've been able to sit and experience that. I really enjoy that. But yeah, that's kind of my predictions for the next episode, maybe the next half of the season, is that we're going to get Matt back in suit probably soon. Fisk is going to be revealed, like we're going to learn more about really what he's doing. And then obviously, I think Frank is probably going to show up maybe towards the later part of this other half of the season, because we've seen the set photos. We know he's going to be in suit with Matt side by side, but we just don't really know how or why. But yeah. And then they're shooting season 2 right now too, and there's more photos coming out every day. And I'm trying to avoid them, but it's kind of hard, and I don't want certain things spoiled for me, certain characters coming back and blah, blah, blah. I don't really want to see that, but it's kind of hard to not look at. But it definitely makes me wonder how in the world season 1 is going to end and where season 2 is going to pick up. This show has been incredible so far. Episode 3, I still think is probably my favorite, but episode 4 is really good. I love that. And this whole scene between Frank and Matt, best part of the episode. No question. It could possibly be maybe the best exchange of the series so far. I think it could be. But yeah. But that was my thoughts on Daredevil Born Again episode 4. Yeah, this show's great. So stay tuned for next week. We're going to be talking about episode 5, like normal again until the show's over, and expect some other stuff in between. If you like what you've seen, consider liking and subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. Leave a comment. What do you think about the episode? And yeah, I'll catch y'all later. Peace.